It's on.
Thank you, David. Well, welcome to the April 9th regular meeting of the Planning Commission. May I first have a roll call, please? And then we'll begin with the introduction of the new commissioners as well.
Commissioner Bagnall.
Here.
Commissioner Coronado.
Here.
Commissioner Duzen.
Here.
Commissioner Elrod.
Here.
Commissioner Graham.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Ranville.
Here.
Commissioner Rudnicki.
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson. You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. This evening, since this is the first meeting with new commissioners, I thought we'd just go around the table before we even get into the agenda and introduce ourselves. And I guess as the chair pro tem, I'll start. My name is Craig Coronado. I've been on the Planning Commission for, I guess, about 3 years now, and my background is landscape architecture, and I'll pass it along to, why don't we go around this way, Karina?
Hi, I'm Karina Elrod. I've been on the Planning Commission for a year now, and my background is strategic planning and marketing.
Andrew?
My name is Andrew Graham. This is my very first day on the Planning Commission, so thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to the council. And I have a medical management business, and I live in the Beaumar South neighborhood.
Okay.
I'm Mark Rudnicki, and let's see, been a resident of Littleton for 20 years or so. Previously, I was on Planning Commission for 10 years. And got term limited, and I was trying to break John Aston Miller's record of 20 years straight, but that didn't happen. So second trip around, I'm an architect by trade.
I knew you looked familiar.
Matt, you want to?
Matt Bagnall, and I've been on the Planning Commission for a year. I work in insurance and project management, and been a resident of Littleton my entire life.
Randy Duzan. This is my first time on the Planning Commission, thanks to the council. I am a land planner, landscape architect for about 30 years, and lived in Littleton for 17 years.
Jenny Ranville, and I've been on the Planning Commission now for 2 years, and my background is I'm an architect.
David Metcalf, been on the Planning Commission for 4 years. You're trying to confuse me with the numbers, Mark. Been on the Planning Commission for 40 years, lived in Littleton for 33. I'm an architect by training, a construction manager by practice, mostly for the last 15, 16 years managing facility program planning for K-12 and higher education.
Well, thank you all, and welcome to our newest members, and even our newest oldest member. Now, if there's any changes to the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. This will be the approval of the minutes from the February 13th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
We already approved those.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Acting Chair, I think we have the wrong date.
Oh, the one I have in front of me. So it's March
26th.
26th.
I motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comment? Discussion? All those in favor?
For you.
Oh, I guess we didn't turn that on.
There's a button right there, I think, Craig.
Technical difficulty.
Right in front of you, Dave.
Oh, he's right.
There we go. Vote passes 6-1. All right. We do have a seat. Mark, would you like to join us up here. Kurt Samuelson couldn't make it this evening, so we have an extra seat. The minutes have been approved. Are there any scheduled or unscheduled appearances? Seeing none, we'll move into our general business calendar. And the first tonight is our annual election of officers. And do you have any input on how to conduct that?
I think what we historically do is just open it up for nominations and then vote on each nomination for chair first and then move to chair pro tem.
Okay.
In that case, I'd like to nominate Greg Coronado as chair.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Speak up now.
Or forever.
Okay. Well, seeing none, I guess we'll call for the vote. Nomination for myself for chair.
Excellent.
Okay.
I think I just said yes.
Even you said yes.
Thank you, everybody. We'll now hold the vote for chair pro tem. Do I have a nomination for chair pro tem?
I nominate David.
I'll second that.
Nobody else is throwing themselves into the breach.
Any other nominations?
Well, us newcomers should stay on the sidelines for a little bit.
Well, okay. Hearing no other nominations, we'll hold the vote for David for chair pro tem. All in favor? Okay.
Thank you, David.
Congratulations.
You owe me one.
Well, I guess we can switch seats next week, or next meeting.
It's not official until your name tag is correct, so please stand
And then it's
by.
not really official until we switch seats so we're in the right place and control the voting.
We'll fix that next week, next meeting.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the appointment of liaisons. And unless anything's changed or there's any other suggestions, we normally do have a liaison to the Historic Preservation Board. And they meet once a month, I believe it is. And it's the third Tuesday, I believe, of the month.
Monday, third Monday.
Third Monday, okay. And it's a great way to hear what the Historic Preservation Board is considering and bring that information back to the Planning Commission. Matt, I believe you served most recently.
Bill, I'm,
Are you still interested in doing that?
I don't mind. I'm fine.
Okay. I don't know if we need to have a nomination to formalize this. If Matt's been doing it and he's interested in continuing to do it, is there any objection to just supporting him in that?
Let's make it formal. I move that we appoint Matt by acclamation.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous.
Ever so modest.
Thank you, Matt, for your service. Okay, now we get into the meat of our meeting tonight. Future ordinance changes affecting the process. We have 3 different items that Glenn will introduce to us. Discussion of the plan development overlay, the TIZ or the transit impact zone, and site development plans. Glenn, would you like to introduce that?
Sure. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I think as far as the plan development overlay, you're pretty familiar with what was proposed to the Planning Commission and recently went before first readings with City Council. The basic change was to move the final authority for approval to the City Council. And there were a number of concerns raised by the Planning Commission, and actually one of the same commissions or one of the same concerns we heard from City Council as well. And that is that when you do that, when you actually ask for council approval, it does take additional time. We argued that we think it would be a more defensible process to do that, but ultimately the goal of the downtown neighborhood plan, and I think City Council's goals, is try and make the processes make more sense. And there was concern about right out of the box, our first one coming before you actually adds time. That kind of ties back to the Planning Commission's roles, so that's why we're addressing PDO. But what I thought would be a good discussion to have is let you know about some of the other changes that we have in the works. A big one has to do with the transit impact zone. But first I'd like to talk about one of the major concerns we've had with development in the downtown area is the number of layers that occurs with the Historic Preservation Board and their approvals, the plan development overlays, the TIS, all those different things. So one thing we are going to propose to the council is that to provide an option, and actually Jan is going to show you a couple of different flow charts, but provide an option to an applicant of whether they want to initially get their certificate of appropriateness approved before coming before the Planning Commission for to review their plan development overlay, thereby saving some time in that particular instance. Then after we talk about that, we'd like to get in a little bit, staff has looked at the TIS. I believe Jan has lived the whole history of the traffic or transit impact zone, see if it's really done what we were hoping it would do, and perhaps there's some efficiency there. So first I'll just turn it over to Jan to talk about the case of somebody trying to get a plan development overlay that's in a historic district and ultimately needing certificate of appropriateness. Yes, you show the flow charts and before and after.
And Glenn, the certificate of appropriateness is specific to historic preservation, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's approval if they're in the Main Street district or a landmark or in another historic district.
Okay. Good evening, Planning Commission. I spent all day making these, so it's my computer skills are a little challenged. But anyway, this my pointer. This chart here represents the current process we have now, and this is the scenario where we have development that's in the TIS and in the historic district that requires a plan development overlay under our current code. And it goes through the steps. I mean, I just started basically with, I didn't include the application and all that stuff. We just started doing the hearing process because it ran out of paper. So I'm starting here with the staff review and recommendation that leads then to a referral to the Historic Preservation Board for recommendation to Planning Commission. Then we go to the Planning Commission hearing for the PDO, and then the Planning Commission makes a decision on the PDO. If they currently our code reads that if Planning Commission denies the PDO, it's a final decision made by Planning Commission. So if Planning Commission denies the PDO, it's an appeal to District Court. If they approve the PDO, then the next step after the PDO is approved before a building permit can be obtained is a hearing back to the Historic Preservation Board to approve the certificate of appropriateness. And then that decision process goes as follows. If the Historic Preservation Board, approves the COA, then we go to building permit. If they deny the COA, appeal goes to City Council. And that's our current process. I have a couple options here on this proposed process that adds changes the role of Planning Commission to recommending body and Council as the deciding body on the PDO. And this option here is pretty much the same process as far as going through the layers. We first start with the staff review and recommendation, the referral that goes to Historic Preservation Board, then that recommendation going to Planning Commission for the PDO, then the PDO recommendation for Planning Commission to City Council, and City Council makes a decision on that PDO. They either turn the PDO down, which then it goes to district court if the applicant chooses to appeal it, or they approve the PDO, and then the next step again before getting building permit after a PDO approval by council would be go back to the Historic Preservation Board to formally get their certificate of appropriateness. And then that HPB decision on the certificate of appropriateness either gets approved, goes on to building permit, or it gets denied, goes to appeal to the city council if the applicant chooses to. And that, that's that layer of going back to the Historic Preservation Board a second time through this process. It's the same as the current plan, current code. This scenario has the 2 reviews by HPB, and then, of course, the final review and approval by City Council. Then I did an option B, where we were looking at trying to run some of this process concurrently regarding the Historic Preservation Board, which, let's back up a little bit. The current process that runs about 6 to 8 months, probably at your worst case scenario. This first option A that adds City Council to the process, but also continues to keep HPB as reviewing this twice. I guessed adding about an extra month onto the process because that extra month is the council's review and decision. Now this next process, this option B that I'm going to present, I guesstimate takes us back a month to the 6 to 8 months that the original process causes because we're proposing with this one that there's a concurrent review approval regarding the certificate of appropriateness. On this option here, we start with the staff recommendation, and then we have the HPB hearing. Instead of it just being their review, this would actually be the hearing where they would consider the certificate of appropriateness initially with their recommendation to Planning Commission. This would be their decision with the certificate of appropriateness. They either approve the certificate of appropriateness, and then the process continues on to the Planning Commission for the PDO portion of it. And then, of course, it also then goes on to the City Council for their hearing. And if City Council approves the PDO, then we go on to recording and building permit. Now, up here, if the HPB board denies the certificate of appropriateness, the applicant can file an appeal to City Council. And then my thought is that the City Council would come down here and they could actually conduct the hearings for both the appeal, the certificate of appropriateness at the same time they're considering the PD overlay. And then if they approve both of those, then of course we go on to building permit. And Planning Commission is sitting over here as a recommendation, and my thought was that, well, if for instance the HPB denied the COA, their recommendation would get forwarded to Planning Commission. Well, Planning Commission decides that they're okay with the PDO because you'll be looking at other factors, not what the HPB considers, but other factors concerning the zoning requirements with the PDO. If you all could make a recommendation of approval for that PDO, you could make a conditional recommendation that the PDO be approved, conditional that the COA is approved, by council. So there's that recommendation, and then council could be considering both the appeal on the COA and the PDO at the same time, so that would be a concurrent process and then that way it wouldn't have to go back again to the HPB board for another review and decision. Because the way it currently works now, really, HPB actually looks at when they get the application the first time, they're really looking at all the criteria and requirements that they're going to be looking at with the certificate of appropriateness, from what I understand. But after it gets through you all as a PDO, and it goes back to them for that certificate of appropriateness, it oftentimes is kind of a formality. I mean, they've already looked at a lot of that. They've, of course, given the applicant feedback, but it's just another step because it's a formality and it's required in the code. So this option B is something that we put together today, thinking that there is a possibility to run this concurrently. It's not real unusual. We have other applications that can be run concurrently through our code. For instance, if property is unplatted and they're rezoning the property for a certain use, the applicant does have the option of running the platting concurrently with the rezoning. They can even run some of the site development plan process along with their rezoning if they choose to. It is a risk that they take because they're usually putting in more money and time for a design without having the entitlement or whatever. But that's something we allow in the code now under a couple other processes. So I don't see that would be any different, with this proposal. So anyway, that's questions about these.
Questions for Jan?
I have a question. Can I see how the process works right now? I wanted to understand how the CO. Okay, so the CO.
On the purple, of course, is the decision boxes, and this one is the Planning Commission's decision regarding the PDO. If of course, the Planning Commission recommends or approves the PDO, it goes on to, it eventually goes on to the permitting. If Planning Commission denies it, right now the process is that the applicant would file an appeal with the district court.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the certificate of appropriateness? What's included in that, or how much effort that takes versus putting together a PDO plan?
Well, I believe, I don't process those, but I believe they do get into quite a detailed level of architecture that they wouldn't necessarily get if, for instance, if you were processing a PDO that's not in the historic district, their architectural drawings on that PDO would tend to not be as detailed probably. They would probably be reflecting more concept designs. And I think they get into a little more detail with the historic preservation board because they're looking at, lintels and windowsills and a lot of detail that aren't necessarily looked at that level of design with just a PDO that's not in the district. So
Why doesn't the Historical Preservation Board do it all in one night?
Right now, actually, I think is the way the code states it will happen.
The code is, yeah.
So they don't have the discretion right now.
So wouldn't that be an option, to have them consider the overall application as well as the certificate of appropriateness at a single meeting?
That's what I described in option B. I don't have that up here, but that's what I was describing in option B, that they would actually be doing the certificate of appropriateness at that earlier on stage.
Was there an intention in splitting those two pieces up when it was originally designed? Was there good logic behind the reason for that?
If I could suggest, Mark, you were liaison to HPB from the Planning Commission for several years, weren't you?
2 years, yes.
So you're fairly familiar with how that process worked?
Yes, this kind of made me forget quite a bit of it.
Okay.
But,
Come on, Mark.
Jan's
It's all his fault.
it's all my fault.
Well, the TIS, let me just tell you a little bit about the TIS ordinance to begin with. I was here, and with the light rail coming in, there was a lot of concern about, development happening quickly downtown and buildings getting knocked down and it not being planned out and there not being a public hearing process involved. And in an effort to address this quickly, they basically did an ordinance that took a tool that already existed in the code, which is this plan development overlay that was used for other issues, and made that the approval process for the downtown and the TIS so that we could get redevelopment in a public hearing scenario. It wasn't very, in my opinion, it wasn't very well thought out. I mean, at the time it seemed okay, but as we all know, when you start using something, you can see a lot of mistakes and flaws and problems with it. Shortly after we adopted that ordinance, we, in 2003, amended it to add some criteria, because the way it originally read, it said development and redevelopment in downtown required a PD overlay. Well, the definition for development or redevelopment actually includes fences. It includes a wall. It includes a number of site improvements that logically we shouldn't be hauling through a PD overlay process to review. So that's when we went back and changed the code and added those requirements of a building that's 500 square feet or more, an addition that's 500 square feet or more, that part of the code that lists out those things, that got added in 2003. So we weren't bringing PDOs in front of you for fences and all. And quite frankly, in that section of the code, it is poorly written, I believe. In my opinion, it's poorly written, and it's unorganized, and it has its issues. I mean, and it's one of the things we really need to clean up, and that includes the Historic Preservation Board's coordination that was put in that same ordinance with that, and it's a little goofy, I must admit. So, so we're looking at something that was done in 2000 and 2003 that, at the time they probably thought was well thought out, but, when we start working with stuff, we find the problems with it, and so that's what we're proposing, to try to kind of reorganize it, clean it up, and look seriously at the criteria that requires these things. I'm doing the same thing with the site development plan as well right now. We're looking at that because, just quite frankly, one of the requirements for somebody doing a site development plan is if they're proposing a use in a building that requires less parking. You don't want me
You're getting ahead of yourself.
But anyway, I'm just trying to tell you that just there's issues with it. It's poorly written, it's unorganized, and we're trying to look at cleaning that up. So
Let me add a little bit to what Jan has been saying, because the scales are falling off here. TIS came about because the city was quite deathly afraid of what was going to happen once light rail came into town, and they were afraid of scrape-offs and assemblage of smaller lots, and then putting in a Rexall drug or something, or parking lots, or you name it. So there was great fear that would happen. That's why TIS happened. And I was the one vote against TIS because in the beginning I thought it was poorly written, poorly organized, too many layers. Developer who wants to develop in Littleton when you have all these layers. Of course, once it was approved, I took advantage of it quite a bit. But really, what the city was afraid of never quite happened. Never happened. I think we could use TIS for the housing developments to the north and the one to the south. We used it for a few things on Main Street. What happened because of light rail? A couple of coffee shops really go in, and one of them's no longer in business. TIS is basically outdated and not needed.
And actually, one other problem we've seen is that there's been some lots, especially like on Sycamore Street and stuff, where you have some kind of dilapidated buildings on them that the owner or whatever wants to sell. And the way the code is written now, I mean, they can't tear down one of those buildings without getting a PD overlay approved. So that has caused those buildings to stay standing, basically. So it just really hasn't accomplished what its intent was.
And the thing with TIS is, downtown Littleton is small lots. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of big things are going to happen because of the small lots.
But even with the TIS going away, either of these, option A or B, is going to address not just PDOs because of TIS, but PDOs, period. Right? Okay.
Right.
So the one thing, I mean, other than the option B, which gives a parallel process for appeals of the COA, I mean, that's basically, you're taking out that appeal step. The rest of the process can go through can move straight forward and not add time to it.
Well, and exactly what you point out just gives them the option.
Right.
They can do a preliminary review by the HPB, or they could go through the full-blown COA.
Okay. Then, in that case, the only difference I think I see between the existing flow, aside from the COA appeal, and the proposed flow, is right now, when the Planning Commission has a hearing or hears the PDO, whether in its or just in a historic district or a designated structure, we can review the PDO for everything except architectural features. We're allowed to pass comments on to HPB, but we can't make any finding.
I believe that's right.
Right. And what we're proposing is that instead, we'll just defer any review of the architectural design features until the HPB has had their chance to review the entire proposal.
Correct.
So that, unless there's some big conflict between architectural features that we would be most concerned with in terms of fitting in to the overall comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance versus what HPB would be looking for from an historic perspective, I mean, that would seem to be the only potential source of conflict, and whether it happens with our making comments to them and then them reviewing the whole thing, or they do the review and pass the comments to us, I don't know that it really matters. If we can expedite the process.
I've never seen that happen.
Right.
No, I mean, it could, but, I think the odds
Nothing
of it-
like that happened with Myrtles?
Well, Merle's wasn't in the district.
Oh, in the historic district, you're right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You're right, those
that did
were
happen,
strictly
but it was-
voluntary
yeah,
comments.
Yeah,
Okay,
those are voluntary.
nice save.
Jan, question about the three different scenarios that you've presented. So as I understand it, the first one is the way it's done now without the city council, that's planning commission makes the determination. Then the second two are options that both add the city council first and second reading review and the Historic Preservation Board, COA, onto it. And you had put out there some sort of estimated timeframes for approvals. I wonder how the three compare based on what we have now without city council, the two reviews.
Well, the one now that doesn't have city council review, I have an estimate about 6 to 8 months, and what I kind of squeezed, what I did to that number includes a 2-month period I kind of threw in there for the applicant to make changes to plans and to get re-reviewed again, so because that always happens. And so the current process, I say 6 to 8 months. The option A, which is the proposed process that doesn't combine the two reviews by the Historic Preservation Board, it's basically the same process as we have now, except we add the council review to it. That adds a month, basically, so I say 7 to 9 months on there. But going to option B, where you've got the option for the Historic Preservation Board decision to be appealed to council. I'm sorry, never mind about the appeal, but where you have the Historic Preservation Board getting to review the COA earlier on and not having 2 meetings with them, and also having the option of a concurrent review with City Council if that should be appealed. I calculated that to kind of go back to the 6 to 8 months, which is the time frame that we have right now. So, and that's because we take out that extra leg of the Historic Preservation Board review, because they meet once a month, and that adds another month, to the review to make that timeline and everything.
So your either proposal is going to shorten the time required for HPB because you're taking the return step out.
Yeah.
Both proposals are still going to lengthen the current process because we now have a city council in for 2 public hearings. But overall, isn't the process, I know, Glenn, this is getting ahead of ourselves, but we're talking about eliminating the DRC function. So isn't that going to take significant time out of the front end of this? So we're not talking 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 months. We're talking something more reasonable?
We hope it will, but that is really a work in progress, so we can't really speak intelligently.
But that is the intent. I mean, I'm just trying to orient ourselves so we're not thinking in terms of 7 or 8 months. We're looking at a potential with the DRC reconfiguration or
right.
Yeah, there's still going to
redefinition.
be staff review on these projects that take some time, but, the coordinating the actual DRC meeting and sometimes getting that scheduled, that's the thing that sometimes adds
same
length to
issue.
something that we can take off.
As a planning commission meeting, they meet, well, in this case, they meet once a week. We have to have a quorum because there's 4 people, and everybody's busy, so we don't necessarily meet every week, and that just adds weeks on to the process.
So that would make, eliminating DRC or minimizing its function would mean the process of doing all the groundwork, getting all the comments, input from the various departments, and looking beyond the city to the county and state, whatever, that would still happen as a staff function without having to go through formal DRC meetings, and there's where the time savings would be.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because there'll be more flexibility with, getting that part of it together without waiting for 4 people to be available to have this formal meeting, so.
And Jan's been working hard on that process, and the funny thing about DRC is it has, we say, the tentacles are all through the code, so it's going to be a major thing, and we'll probably schedule a few meetings to review that before we actually ask you to make a recommendation on it.
If I can follow that line of thinking one more step, HPB reviews everything, issues, their findings of the COA, it comes to the Planning Commission. What's the likelihood that the Planning Commission would find something within the PDO itself that might conflict or cause some problems with the basis for approving the COA? Has anything like that come up before, Jan, or any characteristics that Planning Commission might find more objectionable or less than the Historic Preservation Board in terms of architecture, the form,
Well, I haven't seen that, I don't think, since I've been here. I mean, I think, what you guys normally would be looking at is massing and typically you've been looking at parking and some of signage and some of those things, but
I think
I
that
haven't really seen that happen.
what the issue would be is if you had a public hearing and you had a lot of neighbors come up and they didn't like the architecture or whatever that might be, and you would be in a situation where you couldn't necessarily make wholesale changes.
but then whatever recommendations we made to City Council, those recommendations, HPB's action, and the public comments could all come together in the public hearings, steps 1 and 2 with City Council. So it's not like we're stepping away from it or burying it under the rug. It's still all out there.
True.
Okay.
Question. All these flow charts supposes that the TIS remains. Has there been any talk or any consideration by the commission
It's
to
actually
eliminate the TIS?
our next subject.
It is on the
Am
agenda.
I jumping the gun here a little?
Well, actually, no, because about a year ago, we voted as a group to recommend that the TIS be eliminated. So this is only catching up to what we said a year ago.
Oh, you voted in favor of eliminating TIS, but it was kept by council.
Well, it never came to a, Dennis, do you remember, I know we voted on it, but I think that was when we were still trying to deal with the downtown plan. It never really came to a proposal or recommendation formally to City Council. It was part and parcel of the downtown plan. Okay.
And I think that the TIS is very closely related, obviously, but PDO exists without the TIS as well, so I think we need to consider this separately.
I think when staff presented the PDO ordinance to you, what we alluded to was our feeling that we could eliminate the TIS now, which would reduce the amount of PDOs. Wouldn't change the process necessarily, but there'd be fewer of them. And one of our frustrations is that somebody's doing a 500-square-foot addition. They're meeting all the setbacks. They're meeting all the code requirements, yet they're required to have a public hearing. And for what purpose? It's
If TIS is to eliminate the terrible, rotten things that mass transit would impose on downtown, you up the minimum from 500 to 1,000 or 2,000. That helps. Or you eliminate TIS altogether.
Well, frankly, I've probably processed at least half a dozen PDOs that went to Planning Commission that the PDO, the development met all the zoning requirements, and had there not been the TIS,
Right.
they would have just gone through site plan
Right.
approval.
As long as they comply with the zoning,
Yeah.
the requirements of the zoning district, there's no PDO required. And for that matter, we have 2 TIS zones, one around the Littleton Station and one around the Mineral Station. Half of both zones is residential, in no way, shape, or form gets involved in the PDOs. Most of the South TIS already has PDs in place, and that's not going to come under it. So we're really talking about downtown.
correct.
The other thing is, I see your time, 6 to 8 months, I think, is obscene as far as getting approval for if you're a developer, and I work with a lot of developers. The reputation of Littleton is not a friendly place to build, not a friendly place to develop. All the layers, all the time. 6 to 8 months is preposterous. Maybe you should come with the opposite direction and say, what do we have to do to make this a 3-month process, or 3 to 4 month maximum process? Make it so.
Well, how can we best weigh in on the three options and give you the guidance that you're looking for on these? Obviously, one of the criteria is the sort of ease of getting through the clarity of process, transparency of process, defensibility of process.
So can I just ask one more question before we go forward with that, and that is it a given that council has to approve these? I mean, I sat through the council meeting, and so did you the other day, and to me, they weren't really enthusiastic about the amendment, about taking the authority from the Planning Commission, and so to me, along the lines of keep it to 3 months or 2 months or something like that. I mean, that's just another layer in it. So why couldn't we do it on the front end with the HPB and not change the Planning Commission's authority?
I'll just jump in here. Any zoning needs to be done by legislation, and a motion or a resolution is not legislation. And so staff is going to strongly recommend that it's done through an ordinance and it is done by council.
But if it is already compliant with existing zoning and leaving only those that required variance to go up to City Council, but if it was completely compliant, they could get a definitive answer at the point of either HPB or Planning Commission to move forward.
I think a PDO is, they're going around the zoning.
Yeah, a PDO has to work within the existing zoning district in terms of the use and the intensity of use or density, but a lot of other things are up for grabs with the PDO. The idea was to create some innovation, allow somebody to come in with a proposal that wouldn't strictly meet all of the, sorry Glenn, more form-based aspects of the zoning districts. So there are going to be changes. That's the whole point of a PDO, especially if we take the TIS away. Kirsten, I know Planning Commission had some disagreements last time, thinking that this isn't really a zoning issue because it's an overlay. That the basic zoning, the use and the intensity is still the same, isn't going to change. And so we're really talking about the forms that you see, height and setback and open space and that sort of thing. Could we not maybe shorten this process by not adding City Council approval to this, but City Council as an appeal instead of forcing the applicant as currently stands to go to district court?
We can take a look at that. I mean, we can certainly look at the cases, but I mean, even if it's form, it's still a form of legislation, and that's the way the case is treated. But we can certainly look at that as an option.
You could say the same thing about conditional uses too, and those are still in our hands. One of the few quasi-judicial powers that we still have under the proposed changes. I just think if we think it's important that changes in property use and density that might affect surrounding properties are important to be measured against the comprehensive plan at the Planning Commission level. And City Council wants to be able to have final say in terms of legislative function or whatever, but they don't want to go through the two-step process. It seems to me there's room for accommodation there.
I have a question. Jen, and this is along the lines of where David was talking to earlier. I just want to make sure I'm clear on my understanding. Can the COA be independent of the PDO? So do they need to be reviewed at the same time? So does the PDO have an implication on the COA, or does the COA have an implication on the PDO?
Right now, the way the code is read, that if it's, and the only time a COA would kick in is if it's the Main Street District, Louthan District, or it's an individual landmark and somebody's changing it. But the way it's read right now is you deal with the PDO on the impacts on traffic height, all those various things. HPB does architecture. I guess if one way to break it apart, well, do they actually have to have a certificate of appropriateness to go to finalize the PDO?
So were you going in the direction of trying to accomplish it all at once? Because I
Yeah.
was thinking that too.
So, and that's why I was asking that if it can be independent, because if the COA is really what the HPB has to approve, and the PDO is what the Planning Commission needs to recommend to City Council, so that's another area where I think it can go in parallel, and we can gain some time there.
Yeah, and I think what kind of the sticking point is that somehow the HPB, per code now, has to give you input on architecture.
But does that impact the PDO?
Well, the real question is, all architectural elements or those architectural elements that the HPB finds critical for issuing or denying a COA. I mean, if they can pass that down back to us and then to us alone or to us in City Council with a, yes, we're issuing the COA, we find the following architectural elements critical to the COA, as long as those aren't changed in subsequent review, COA's in effect. Mm-hmm. And that would seem to be a fairly easy adjustment to make in the process.
It's possible. I think my biggest concern would be you get all the way through the PDO process and it's approved. They go to HPB and the certificate of appropriateness is not approved because of something allowed through the PDO, whether it's type of roof or something along that line.
The other side of the coin is if it goes through HPB for approval and gets a COA based on the architectural elements, we see it and say, wait a minute, that's a major conflict with a comp plan, and we overrule or get them to adjust something that then tells HPB, well, if we had known that, we wouldn't have given them a COA. That's why I'm saying if it goes to HPB and they issue a COA highlighting those elements that are critical to their having issued the COA, everybody knows what we're dealing with up front when it comes to us.
Right, right. Yeah, it's definitely a chicken and or egg issue. I'm not sure what's the best way.
It sounds like it's going to be a rare chicken and a rare egg.
I hate to bring up chickens.
Well, once a year. No, that was 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. But it sounds like it's a reasonably rare enough occurrence, especially once we get rid of the TIS.
Correct. That's the hope. But good discussion. Good points.
And I think if it does stay that it goes to City Council, that's another opportunity where all of those discrepancies or, recommendations come
together.
Yeah, to a culmination for then City Council to approve. Now,
Yep.
I, like Matt, and I'm not seeing the value of City Council's role in this. So, again, I question the need for that step, and especially considering it's adding substantial time to a process that we're trying to reduce time to.
I understand that. I think staff is just kind of firmly along the tenet that a PDO is zoning, and therefore it should be an ordinance and have the power of an ordinance. So that would be our first recommendation to council. Now, if council might tell us to go back and rethink it, and we will certainly do that.
Go ahead.
I definitely appreciate, Jan, your diagrams, putting that together, and I think anything that can run concurrently to speed up the process, I think is beneficial, especially with the Historic Preservation Board. Seems like that they can take care of both to review the project and be able to issue that certificate of appropriateness, and so it seems like that seems to make a lot of sense, regardless of which direction with the PDO, whether it's Planning Commission is the last say or City Council is the last say. It just definitely does seem like the Historic Preservation Board getting that to move faster, I think would be helpful.
I'm sorry, I have another question. Mark's point about, time to develop, and as we think about what our competition is, other cities, so Inglewood comes to mind, that probably has maybe a similar situation where I don't know if they have a TIS or something like a TIS, but when we think about businesses coming to Littleton and they're going through this process, what's our competition? So if it's not Littleton, where are they going and what's the process there? So how do we, as we look at some of these plans and proposals, how do we fare against some of the surrounding municipalities?
I can answer Douglas County is agony, but that's where the people are, so you're going to have development there, but it's very time-consuming.
I don't know, at least in my time here, I haven't really surveyed the other communities. As far as a certificate of appropriateness or some kind of plan development, I'm sure every city has those same processes. How they're integrated, I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Dave.
Jan, you've done a lot of legwork trying to track all these things down and extract all the different threads, but I'm going to suggest you take a look at 1095H2B3 and see how that has a slight different emphasis on the architectural feature review with what's proposed as 1098B1. It's a difference between defer versus take no action and pass on the recommendations. So I just might want to look at those sections and get the language parallel. Hey, Jan, for everything else you did, for me to nitpick like this is silly, but it's a slight difference that we probably ought to reconcile.
Can you clarify that, David? Where are you looking at? What line is it?
Well, right now, as it is, 1095H2B3, is that long enough for you? Which we're not changing with the proposed ordinance, indicates that the Planning Commission shall make no finding regarding architectural design, but may forward comments to HPB. This new item, 1098B1, says the Planning Commission shall defer review of proposed architectural design features. So I think we just make those two comments the same. I mean, it's hard to make the recommendations under the existing code that when we're deferring the architectural review under the proposed revised code.
I think under H2B, well, you have H2A that talks about the site being in the historic district.
Right.
And then H2B is looking at what you find for any PDO that's in the TIS, and you have some that are not in historic district, and therefore those properties you would be looking at the architectural fenestration and facades.
But if we eliminate the TIS, it all goes into the same PDO barrel.
Well, you'll have the historic district downtown, and then you'll have the downtown area.
Okay, well,
I just wanted to clarify that that's written like that in this current form because it's for the properties that currently would be in the TIS but not in the historic district. You would be then looking at for those properties, the Planning Commission would be considering the architecture and design.
as long as staff finds no conflict in that, we can defer our review and make comments anyway, I suppose.
Since we have a lot on the agenda, I'd like to move this along. Do we want to make a motion on support of one of these two alternative processes? What I'm hearing is general consensus that we want to cut the amount of time required to minimize the amount of time required to get through the process.
Is staff looking for reconsideration of the proposed ordinance?
No, sir.
No, okay.
No, sir. I was just hoping to have the discussion and perhaps consensus, and I think what I heard is you still hold hard and fast to the fact that you think the PDO process should stay with Planning Commission or end at Planning Commission. I think you like some of these ideas, but if there's a way to break them apart and perhaps parallel, and there'd be additional savings there. And then the final would be, hopefully, you're in support of getting rid of the TIS. Mm-hmm. I see heads nodding. Okay.
That's a good segue to the next topic.
Just have one other thing, and it's a pretty simple item, but when we look at the site development plan standards, there's just wide breaching requirements for applicability. And one thing we suffer with, that any change in use that requires an increase or reduction in parking shall go through this staff, which now includes the DRC, shall go through this process. So even reducing the impact and reducing the need for parking still has to go through this process, and we find that just onerous, and again, it doesn't really add any value to the process. And we've had to do it, where a use is changed from a restaurant to an office or something that would actually reduce parking standards. They're not doing anything else. They're doing tenant improvements. We force them through the site plan approval process, even when they're not changing the site plan. So we want to fix that, and we want to have it really geared away from a change in use to an increase in impact. So that's something that Jan's also working on right now. Again, I think it will really cut some time out of some of the processes that we're mandated to go through. You have any questions about that, or?
So we're saying a change in use within the permitted uses in that zoning district. If the current use requires one parking space per 100 square feet, and the new use is only going to require one per 250, or vice versa, then as long as the new plan complies with that the parking requirements for that use, it's fine. We're not talking about lowering them or raising them beyond that.
Right.
And that still leaves us room to maneuver on the search for improving downtown parking as set out in the downtown plan.
Yes.
What percentage of your applications does the parking fall within that?
Well, let's see, I don't know if I can say a percentage, but just recently we've worked on a case with a change of use in the existing downtown Main Street district. They had a break in the parking because they're in the Main Street district. The building's certainly fixed. They're not doing an addition, but technically that would be something that would have to go through the site development process. I don't know if you have a feel for a percentage that you run into that are like that.
How much time does that add to the process?
It could add, it definitely adds a lot of engineering time, because that
Consultants
also,
and money. Yeah.
it kicks in drainage studies and a few things, nasty things like that. So, and probably adds, easily 3 to 6 weeks. And the additional architectural engineering work that's doesn't do any good.
I'll speak up and say that I'm in favor of anything that streamlines a process, having been on the other side, worked with developers. Any way we can improve our competitiveness is important, I think. And I think putting developers and owners through a process that to them may seem pointless just because it's in the ordinance, I think I would be in favor of reducing those redundancies and erroneous type of processes.
Given my obsession with finding problems professionally and personally, I'm tend to take the longer view, and I guess I would want to run a couple of scenarios past. We've got several properties downtown that are currently under a PDO. If somebody would come in and propose a change in use that would require more parking than what the original PDO incorporated, could they insist on standing on the original parking requirements through the PDO, or would they revert to the requirements per use for the underlying zoning district? That was complicated, I know, but
I would state that they'd have to meet the new parking requirements or amend the PDO, come back before and amend it.
Yes.
Okay, so they still would have the possibility of ducking under the existing zoning district requirements for that use by amending the PDO.
Sure.
Okay.
Everybody has that, right?
Okay. If somebody came, the second scenario, and then I think that's it for how far ahead I can look. If somebody would come through and say, we're going to change the use of this property to something that requires less on-site parking, therefore we can expand the building and take up some of the parking, the space that had been set aside for parking. And then someone comes along 10 years later and says, we're going to go back to the old use. What are our options? Tell them find off-site parking someplace or tear down part of the building?
Well, initially, if you have to provide on-street parking,
No, on-site.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
off-street parking, then you'd have to do that, or you go through a process and ask for a waiver,
Hardship.
whether it be a PDO, PDC, whatever that case might be.
Okay. Okay.
Not a variance, because if you have PDO, you're kind of shut out of that process. But you would be amending that plan development.
And then it has to go through the same review as any other original PDO as far as conformance to the comp plan, et cetera. Right.
I hate to interrupt. I have to leave, so I emailed you about that earlier.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Matthew. Back to the site development plan, that's by ordinance, that requirement, the change of use would, kicks in the requirements for site development plan approval, correct?
Correct.
So, and the draft ordinance here, does that include that language, or would that be forthcoming?
That would be forthcoming to you.
Okay,
Right, as well as eliminate the TIS.
I see. Can we talk about options for the TIS now? Should we move into that? Because I imagine, certainly one of the options that's been thrown out there is eliminating it. Are there other alternatives, such as reducing the radius or increasing the point where it kicks in, that should be considered?
Staff have any comments? Is there any effect, does the TIS provide any particular protection to non-business properties within the TIS? I mean, that was one of the first things we started talking about and didn't see any.
You said non-business protection?
Right. Early on, when we were talking about this, Mark, as part of the downtown plan and comp plan review, one of the concerns was, what about the impacts of the light rail station on the residential areas? And I think we came to the conclusion that it doesn't affect it, doesn't do them any good one way or the other. So unless there's some benefit to anybody with the TIS, other than the goal that, as Mark pointed out, was stated and not terribly, didn't seem to come into play very often, then it would seem the options are either an eraser or redacting from the code.
One of the thoughts that came to mind was, what is it, a mile radius now on the TIS, or half mile? Half mile. With TOD types of developments, I think the current thinking is a minimum of quarter-mile radius, which is a 5-minute walk, and beyond that, people are more likely to use their car. But the demand for higher density development would be within that walking distance radius from the transit station. And we have also heard a lot about the sort of arbitrariness of that half-mile radius right now, especially with the grade separated railroad there, and it reaching out into places that really could be argued are not impacted by transit. I just wonder if tailoring that perimeter to something either a quarter mile or perhaps something more even customized to that might still provide the benefit that was originally foreseen, but then free up development potential outside that area. Jennifer?
One of my concerns with the TIS is how low the square footage is for it's 500 square feet or more, and 500 square feet is quite small. Like that to me is like a residential addition. So for me, that basically any project is flagged for being a PDO, and so the scale of the project I think is much too small. Projects that are large and complex are going to end up in a PDO. They're not going to go, or PD plan, that they're not going to go straight zoning. And the CA zoning is pretty restrictive for height, and so any large complex project is going to ask for more height. They're not going to go straight zoning. And also the R5 as well has its height is more residential setbacks. So I guess for me and the concern of eliminating the TIS, it's with our current zoning in place, I think we're still going to see those large projects or complex projects. Those are still going to come before Planning Commission, and we don't have to require that of them. they're going to come. They're going to specifically want to have greater height, want to have adjustment with the setbacks, want to have something with the parking. There's those items continually keep coming forward. So if the TIS does stay, if that amongst the planning commissioners, and the square footage being so small is, to me, is one of a great restriction, and I think cumbersome for anyone who has smaller projects. So I'm certainly okay with doing away with the TIS, but if it does stay, I think that it should flag the big projects, not the small ones. And so that's my...
David?
If somebody wants to be innovative, mixed use, different form, building forms or site arrangement, they can choose to go through a PDO whether the TIZ is there or not, right?
Correct.
Okay, so then the only question is, since we've now pretty much knocked out the mineral station TIZ as having any impact on anything because it's either residential or already under PD, and we've knocked out half of the downtown TIZ because half of it's residential, the rest of downtown is under a downtown plan now. So what protections would the TIZ offer the community or surrounding properties that aren't there now with the comp plan and either the existing zoning, CA mostly, or the PDO process?
Let me phrase that in another way, and maybe you can answer that together, is the sheriff's site has been one that's been looked at for redevelopment. It's within the TIZ. It's a B2 zone, so it's not the CA zone. What would be the potential impacts on that site?
Well, with that particular site, it would have to be a commercial use. And I think at least the discussions I know that they've brought forward has been to change it to residential, so then you're talking a rezoning there. I think what I've seen the biggest threat would be is if somebody wanted to acquire, assemble a number of parcels and decide to demolish it and put in a parking lot. And that maybe is contrary to the downtown neighborhood plan. Maybe it's something you'd want to look at and how to reduce impacts of that. And it would be an allowed use in a number of those districts. So,
But that's a good example. If the sheriff's property were to come before the planning commission, the city, now, it's under the TIZ, it would have to go through PDO. And granted, there is no height limitation on there, but at least we'd have to consider it and measure it against the comprehensive plan. If we take the TIZ away, it's a B2. There are no height limitations on B2. They can propose anything. And we'd be hard put to avoid an appeal to district court by saying you're surrounded by residential or largely surrounded by residential and open space. We want to limit it to 4 stories.
right, that's
That's the only effect I can see.
right. Yeah, even through the PDO process, I think Dave's right. I don't know that you can say that you can't meet the zoning requirements, or you want to restrict it more than the zoning requirements.
And it's outside the downtown zone, so that part of the comprehensive plan goes away too.
Forgive me for not being totally up to speed, being fairly new, but does the TIZ, is it only protection or is it also incentives? Are there any
I don't believe
incentives?
there's any incentives. No, it was really a stopgap concern of when they opened up the transit station that there would just be wholesale redevelopment and nobody would have a chance to look at it. I think that was the main concern.
Because in the vein of TOD development, the concept is within the quarter-mile pedestrian shed, you do want to encourage some form of development to make the transit station a healthy economical environment for development. And in order to achieve that, you do have to sometimes provide incentives for either parking credits or building height concessions based upon certain development criteria. So that's why I ask if there are any incentives versus just protections.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a good point, is you could take a look at it rather than restricting development, but what incentives can we provide within a quarter mile to make sure it's a walkable environment?
Right. And maybe you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, is if you can come back to us and tell us if we would take the TIZ away what are the effects on some of these random properties that aren't under a CA with a height limit? And basically, it's B2, and there are 3 or 4 of them. What would be the advantage? How would you go about finding the balance, which is what we're here for, between protecting private property rights for development and protecting surrounding private property rights from development? And there's a balance point someplace. If the TIS can address that in both directions, then we may be someplace. If TIS isn't the way, then let's explore the consequences now, which sounds like they didn't explore too many consequences when they put the TIS in place in the first place. But let's explore the consequences now. Let's revise the TIS to do both, or find some alternative measure.
I wouldn't do away with it. I would look at revising it and maybe making it better.
And, getting back to your original question, Randy, I think there is some incentive in there for developers. It may not be explicit, but as a tool to negotiate with the city and vice versa to come up with a better character of development. You're not going to get a prescribed per zoning product.
But let's keep something in mind. When City Council challenged us 4 years to restart the comp plan update process, they asked us specifically to look at the unintended consequences of how the PDO and the TIS function. There was some strong opinion on the part of a couple of council people that the TIS was just flat out another layer of process, another layer of bureaucracy, didn't add any effective protection, didn't offer any incentives. Why do we have it? I think that basic question, maybe without quite the bite to it, is still out there. And it'd be worth exploring, pros and cons.
I hate to even suggest this, but one thing you could do is go back to the downtown neighborhood plan and look at the quarter mile and what possible incentives might be, and maybe start at the policy level and then.
My homework is to read everything. Get up to speed.
Take you through a situation here. Let's see, the IREA building, or the sheriff's building, is within the TIS, within a half-mile radius. It didn't come before the Planning Commission on a formal basis, but I remember seeing a concept, I don't know, maybe you did too, going back in the archives of quite an interesting development with, I think, a mixed-use residential, commercial, or business. But I was personally involved with a project on Gallup Street where DRC put my owner and myself through the grinder as far as, and this is straight zoning, put us through the grinder on the architecture style, as well as just trees, parking requirement, floods, et cetera. But they got involved with the architecture in a straight zoning area, commercial. If TIS goes away, will the city, I never had the guts to ask the city on the Gallup if they had the right to challenge me and my client on the architecture intent, but they did. If TIS goes away on sites that are, then go back to straight zoning, like the B3 there, does the city still have a hammer?
That's a really good question, and I've been trying to mull that over. I mean, even if we do a PDO process, does it mean we can change the underlying zoning requirements? And I'm not really sure what the answer is. I mean, if an owner says, hey, my zoning allows this, yes, you have a PDO process, and I disagree on reducing my height or requiring a certain kind of architecture, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the answer is. The best answer I can give you is it forces a hearing. So it forces a public hearing where people can come in and give you comments on the project. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm
Sorry I couldn't answer that better.
No, I think that's good. I mean, what we've looked at is sort of what's the upside and downside of both TIS as it is, and it doesn't sound like there is a whole lot of upside other than maybe some protections that really haven't come into play yet on a case-by-case basis. But also look at the pros and cons of alternatives, either changing the TIS itself to meet a new intent, or finding other ways than the extra layer of TIS to accomplish the same ends. I think that was still a discussion worth having.
I think we have to eventually make a judgment call as to what we think are, like, what the developers will be able to assemble. Are they going to be able to assemble along Main Street? Doubtful. Can they assemble in the old industrial area? Well, there was a big enough industrial facility that they didn't have to assemble. The lot was there. We have a couple other, the housing development just south of where we are sitting. They assembled, 2 or 3 houses, and hasn't been built yet, but it's there and approved. So are we afraid of assemblage, or we figure it's just not going to happen?
I think the thrust of our discussions the last 4 years has been not afraid of the change. It's been defining in advance the criteria by which a proposal will be evaluated. So everyone's meeting the same criteria, and it's not up to a case-by-case ad hoc decision. The property you're talking about has a, dare I ask, Dennis, 66 feet approved height, something like that. Anyway, it's way out of scale with most everything else downtown. So our concern from the beginning, whether it's PDO or the TIS or anything else, was let's at least define what the criteria are and then put that out there so there's predictability.
Predictability is very good, yes. Ease of getting through is also good.
Sounds like we've handed you more work instead of...
We definitely heard support for eliminating the TIS around the mineral station. That's one. And looking at some options for it in the downtown area, whether it be a smaller footprint or a higher trigger or other better ways to apply that.
I'm sorry, could I ask you to restate what you, the TIS around the mineral station, what is the... Has there been a consensus as to should it stay there, should it go?
Well, what we heard, I think, from Jan at the last meeting was that those are all zoned. Those areas are all zoned PD already within that area, so that the PDO really doesn't necessarily come into play.
And it's built out to the north and to the east, and south's pretty decent, so not much left.
Pretty moot.
Yeah. Okay.
I apologize. I'm going to need to leave.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Any other on the TIS at this point? We should talk briefly about the site development plan process. When you talk about impact, I assume that means with respect to parking that there's a potential increase in parking.
Right.
So that the trigger might be changed from anything that might reduce parking to anything that would potentially increase. Are there other impacts besides parking? Potential impacts that would be considered?
Would traffic be one? Allowed use, it's allowed use, right? Yeah, we were kind of looking. Yeah, I think what we really want, the increased impact is something that would change the site plan at some point. That's what we were really thinking. So maybe it's an additional buffer, maybe it's additional parking, something that would increase the intensity of the use of that site as being more of a trigger than any change, whether it's up or down.
But you're saying to consider that an administrative and staff decision as long as it's within the constraints of the underlying zoning, or the use within that zoning?
Yeah, we'd actually have this stated in the code, the trigger, but it does trigger a staff process.
Of course, if we take the DRC out of it, and DRC figures heavily in the SDP approval process now.
Yes, they do.
Are we at all concerned about, how do I put this, visibility, transparency?
I think that's possible, but I guess I would state the DRC, I think, was partially created in order to kind of have that formal out there appearance, and it's certainly not the desired result that's occurred from it. So I think we're still going to use a staff review because it's still our goal. We have to get input from Public Works and engineering and fire department, all those outside agencies. So that's not going to go away. It's taken away the formality of 4 people that have to take action on all these different things.
And again, as long as it meets code requirements for the use within that underlying zoning, it really isn't an issue unless the applicant was looking for something better and then wants to appeal it to the Planning Commission, correct? Okay.
And that's actually something we'll probably create more of, is if they do have an issue with some call we make, they appeal it to the Planning Commission. So you may see more of that.
Can I describe my, pardon me, why don't you finish up?
30 seconds, or 10 seconds. So it either complies with the use for that underlying zoning, or they appeal it and it becomes a public process. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Maybe DRC has changed from the time that I had with them, the delightful time, but let me describe it. There weren't 4 people in that room over there. There was, I think, half the city closed down, and everybody was in that little room. I was first up on the agenda. They
It was just for you, Mark.
Yeah. Made me wait an hour and a half, so my owner is livid. So am I. And then they asked extremely personal questions that I thought extremely offensive, getting into his business model and his income and his wife's maiden name. I mean, preposterous stuff. Is DRC now 4 people in a room, or is it still that half the city in that room?
We haven't actually officially been meeting much as DRC, but
There's no development.
Part of the problem is getting the 4 people together.
But it's more than 4.
Yeah.
It's typically more than 4. And one thing, I think one of our goals is that rather have it be that board that's kind of the gotcha board, is we'd really like to utilize that group as more of a proactive due diligence kind of experts. If somebody brings in a new project, we can show you kind of the constraints on the property and opportunities to make the development work. So
Would they
put
be-
them up close.
Would they be advisory to you, or would they still be meeting with the
They'd still be meeting with the
applicant?
Right. But then they ultimately make their submittal and go through the process with staff.
So basically, it would be a staff working with the applicant to make sure the applicant understands what the requirements are.
Right.
Not doing any horse trading on it. It just removes the DRC from it, and then if the applicant wants to go beyond the underlying zoning requirements, it's got to come to the Planning Commission.
Right.
Okay, so that part would still be public, transparent.
Yeah, I think of it more as a pre-technical group. So you have a proposed project, we're telling you what the sewer line sizes are, sidewalks, all that sort of thing. And then you make the decision whether you go forward. But we tell you up front what all the issues are.
More like a pre-app?
Right, exactly.
Pre-apps are nice because they do give you staff input right up front. And so you know where you're headed. And then you work it out with the staff, the planning staff. I've had personal encounter with the DRC 8 years ago. I actually own a property over here and had to go through it. So I sympathize with you.
So getting back to the original question of the site development plan change in ordinance, that would be specific to change in use, correct? And potential impacts associated with change in use.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
I'm trying to imagine any scenario where actually a reduction in impact might actually be a negative. I can't think of one offhand, but...
I'm actually not following this third bullet here. So when we look at site development plan standards, and it says some of the requirements staff is considering changing includes, and then it lists 3 bullet points. So the third bullet being changing the focus on applicability from changes in use to increased impacts from site plan changes. So should I be reading this to say the approvals to, actually I don't know how to read this. Can you help me understand this third bullet?
Yeah. Right now, a portion of the code talks about any change in use that increases or reduces parking, for instance. And what we'd like to really have the focus is any change in the intensity of the use that requires a change to the site plan would kick in this process. So you could have a site that has enough parking. They bring in a use that actually does not need all the required parking, And right now, the code mandates they go through this technical process, even though the site is not changing. So we really want to change the focus to changes in intensity of use that would change the site plan, that would force a change of the site plan.
So not a change in use like a doctor's office to a lawyer's office, but a change that would have a negative impact or an increased impact, regardless of what they're doing.
Typically, it would be a retail use to a restaurant. It's a big part. A restaurant's a big parking user. If the site doesn't have the parking spaces, they've got some issues, and they're going to have to change the site.
But then changing from the specific use to looking at the potential impacts on the surrounding property is really more consistent with what we did with the downtown plan, looking at how it fits in, how it fits in the context. And it could be plus or minus. I mean, it may appear to be a change that's going to have negative impacts for certain portions of the community. It could have positive impacts for other portions of the community as far as stimulating traffic downtown, that sort of thing. So it could cut either way.
How do you measure that?
Can I give you a couple of scenarios that I've had in the past that seemed totally ridiculous that we were requiring them to do a site plan for? I mean, one would be in a case where you've got an existing site, there's lots of parking on it already. What's been in there has been an office, and now they've come in and they want to put a restaurant in there. Well, they're changing the use to a use that requires more parking. We make them go through the site plan process, but they already have a parking lot that already meets the requirements. I mean, per our code, we're technically supposed to make them go through site plan approval. You know, and then we have the other case where our code now currently requires if the building square footage increases by, I think it's 5% or more, that they have to go through site plan approval. Well, I've had some cases where it's increased by maybe 10%, but that building addition isn't increasing their parking situation, and they're not taking away any required open space that they're required to have. But because they're increasing the building square footage by more than 5%, we have to haul them to the site plan approval. So that's what we're trying to do is eliminate not only like an impact that isn't one reducing the parking, but this arbitrary 5% or 1,000 square feet or whatever if it's not actually resulting in an impact.
And so
to
that, and that's kind of what I was questioning, how do we measure impact? Like what is considered, and how do we define negative impact?
Well, typically, it is something you can measure. That would be increased parking, increased trips in and out, so traffic increase. Those are the two biggies that come to mind.
So, but then the other side of that coin is increased traffic stimulates business potentially. So I don't know. It's just.
I think really we would limit it to what changes that site plan. So we're not just forcing somebody to go through a process when nothing's changing on the site or nothing needs to change on the site.
So the case where the restaurant came in and increased their parking requirements, but yet they had a parking lot that could already accommodate it.
Correct.
Would that be administrative, as long as they prove it?
It'd be an administrative process, but it would require architectural plans, engineering on drainage, a number of things.
Because I totally agree that if they have the parking, they're done.
Right. Right. That's basically what we're getting at. And it's usually in the case of it's always in the case of an existing site that we get trapped by the current code.
So it's really not, the goal here is not to relax enforcement of existing requirements. It's merely to take out an unnecessary step in the cost and time to prepare and submit and approve an SDP.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see the city slacking off in making this a better city. This is just to streamline the process, make your job easier, make our job easier, and add development to the city that needs it badly.
Well, by streamlining, we do make it a better city.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
As long as we keep the basic protections in place, I agree.
And you'll get a chance to see this in detail, too. It's just something we want to throw out there that we do have other ideas how we take the overall time away from the process.
Well, I know that Dennis has put some preparation into the comp plan, so should we move on to the next item and talking about the Inspire Littleton Comprehensive Plan?
A series of questions that we've been developing in-house for the Inspire Littleton website.
Closer. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay, sorry. We sent a set of questions to Planning Commission that we've been working on in-house for the Inspire Littleton website, which is www.inspirelittleton.org. If you haven't gone on to that site yet, please do, and we will actually have that going live on May 1st. In fact, in anticipation of that, at the next meeting, which is May 23rd, or April 23rd, excuse me, we're going to actually have a demonstration for you for that website, have you all log into that and actually have your names in, and so you'll actually be registered for it. So if you have a laptop, please bring it. If you don't have one, we'll
What's the
provide
date
one
of that,
here.
Dennis?
The 23rd.
Okay.
So, and we'll have people from our consulting firm, which is Mind Mixer, which will be working with us on that. And if you're not familiar with this, it's a great interactive website. It's very cool. We've been very impressed with how they've been working with other cities. I think it's very exciting in terms of developing the kind of conversations that we're looking for this process. And that's what City Council is really hoping for, is to get the conversations going in terms of what do we want to be, who are we now, and where are we going. And that's what the questions are intended. We've actually looked at developing, out of those 83 questions, we're looking at the 7, which we think will probably generate the most conversation initially that we'll start that website with. And we've come up in-house with a list, and then we've actually run those by the consultant who's worked with other cities and see what they think is going to be most effective. And we've come back with a list of 7, which we think are good to start. And then over time, we're looking at adding an additional question each week. So we'll go to a total of 10 questions, and then after we reach a total of 10, then the following weeks, we'll look at dropping off one question, so we kind of keep that core group of 10 questions. And the one that drops off, we're kind of open to whether it's the one that's generating the least conversation currently, or if it's just the oldest one on there. We'll probably play that by ear a little bit. But the 7 that we've looked at is probably the most interesting in terms of the conversation are number 2, which says, what do you love about Littleton? And I can actually stick these out here for folks at home.
Should have another question that says, what do you dislike about Littleton? Probably gain more knowledge from that.
That comes later, and we may have that. People may enter that anyway, I would assume. Well, one of the things that, as an aside to that, one of the things that the consultant does provide is kind of a filtering operation for us. They're a totally neutral party, so they'll go through, and if there's something that's too offensive or something that's totally off track, they will take that off for us, so they'll filter that out for us, so they actually will pull those out. The second question is, what would improve the livability of your neighborhood? And I think everybody has kind of an idea of what are they looking at.
Can you give us a number, Dennis?
Yeah, the second one is number 18. The third one is number 22. What do you want Littleton to be known for? And again, kind of thinking towards the future. And the fourth one is number 43. What changes do you anticipate in Broadway, Bellevue, and Littleton Boulevard? And the fifth one is number 54, which what is the prettiest street in Littleton? So what do you think of in terms of what? And that's something we may be doing later on in the public meetings, is doing these kind of visual preference surveys. It's a great tool for getting a sense of what people like and don't like and what they think of not only what's here, but what they'd like to see being here. So I think it's kind of introduction to maybe what we do later. 69 is the sixth one. That is, what do you think are the economic implications of Littleton shifting from an expanding community to an infill community? And that means that we're anticipating that we won't be annexing much the way we're going currently, although that's a question that we actually have on there too, is how do people feel about annexation?
Will you define infill?
Infill currently is...
I know what infill is.
Oh, sure.
Will the public know what it is?
That's a good question. We probably will need to do that, yeah, as part of the questions, to have a definition for that. I think that's a great idea, to kind of explain what it is. It's a good thought. And the seventh one is, do you think the city should actively seek and provide incentives to attract certain businesses? So we're trying to kind of cross the boundaries here in terms of all the topics. So the way we developed the 83 questions was we did kind of this kind of pollination of looking at the different topics that we thought should be in the comprehensive plan based on what's in the existing plan, as well as kind of what the current issues are. And then we looked at the city's goals, the council goals that they've been developing, and that's what you see on the right-hand side there. And I know it's kind of confusing, and I sent those out in an additional email later, but I think if you look at those goals, number 4, which is the one with all the X's up here even, is the goal that probably most directly applies to what we're doing in the comprehensive planning process, what we do, what you do on a regular basis with the kind of decisions that you are faced with, kind of discussions you have. Number 4 is talking about quality of life and how that applies to the comprehensive plan and housing and neighborhoods, and it really gets into a lot of things. We also, though, are trying to get into some other areas, so you'll see that we do also look at number 3, which is the summary is a well-developed and maintained public infrastructure. So talking about infrastructure questions, and it really is looking at bricks and mortar stuff. It's looking at streets and water lines and sewer lines and that kind of stuff. It talks about infrastructure, and we will get into that. And then the 5th one, which we also have some direction to, states a balanced and sustainable local economy. So we're looking at economic questions too, and we do have questions about how do we proceed? What do you think is the right way to go to make sure we're a healthy community physically? And then the 7th one is also, the 6th one, environmental sustainability. So we do have some environmental sustainability questions too. So we tried to look at how are we getting questions which address all of the City Council's goals. Do we cover all the issues that are anticipated to be in the comprehensive plan? And with 83 questions, we anticipate we'll be able to address a lot of those things. We also anticipate that as we get conversations going, we'll have questions arise that we weren't anticipating. And so we'll be able to add those as we go through. The consultant's been very happy with the kind of discussion we've had to date. And looking around other communities that they've worked with, they think we're fairly far ahead in terms of kind of thinking about what we want to get out of the public input process. We also are excited because we've had people sign up for this thing already, and it's kind of in line with what the consultant's been saying is they get people involved that we might not have involved otherwise, and they get invested in the process at that point because they've had an opinion, they've had something that they put out there, and so they tend to come to the public meetings on a more regular basis than they would otherwise, and a higher incidence of coming. It gets to be kind of a competitive process, which is kind of cool, where if you get conversation going, you get points. If you get people responding to your comments, you get points for that. And so people kind of get into the idea that, they may have more points than someone else, which is kind of fun. So I think it's going very well. We're kind of excited. So any comments or questions kind of about what we're doing with the questions? And kind of, yeah.
I've got a couple of quick ones.
Okay.
I can reduce your list to 80 very easily.
Okay.
33 and 45 are the same.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
70, 71 are the same as 74, 75.
Ah, okay.
So
okay.
you just saved 3 questions.
Wonderful.
Professional editing would be in
Right.
order here.
Okay, good.
Overall, I guess, remembering what we did in a much more primitive survey process 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, one of the things I think we're going to need from this is perspective. Who's answering this? It's like our question we ask about whether there was a parking problem downtown. Well, it all depends on who you are, where you're going, when you're going there. We need perspective because the raw data will do us no good whatever.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we liked about this program is that they do get that kind of information, and they're able to start doing some cross-correlation in terms of...
And that was the other thing, was cross-referencing a lot of these things. I mean, somehow or other, if we can refine the questions or as we pointed out, maybe give them a little basic education on what we mean by infill and that sort of thing. You got a couple questions there on characteristics of a great neighborhood, or what was the other one? What would improve the livability of your neighborhood? We need to know what their neighborhood is, and B, what they think of as their neighborhood. Some people may think of, you've heard this before, Dennis, some people may think of their neighborhood as far as they can see. Other people may think it's, down to the next major street. But we need to have that information, or we're going to be flailing around trying to apply the information we get from questions like this. And then there are a lot of questions that, like with any survey, sometimes they refer back to each other so you can test the validity. Between three questions addressing the same thing from slightly different angles. I'm assuming that Mind Mixer will help us.
They will help us with that, absolutely. Okay. And they also, it's kind of, I think it's a fun process just because they have different ways of answering questions. Some of them are totally open-ended. Some of them are actually, there are challenges that come along with it. There are different ways that they've got to kind of get information out of people and encourage them to participate.
Mainly,
so I think you're going to see a variety of question types.
And mainly what I'm thinking is if we anticipate how somebody is going to read this, who doesn't have our preparation for it. For example, when we ask about what changes do we anticipate to Broadway, Bellevue, and Littleton Boulevard, what do we mean by anticipate? Right. What we think is inevitable, what we see happening now, what we'd like to see. We need to know that.
Absolutely. And this is our original language. We're going to run this by Mind Mixer again, and they're going to help us actually write these questions in a way that we'll get the answers we need, which is great. I think we had good luck with that when we did the written survey for the last process for the downtown plan. And I think, again, that kind of expertise is useful. So
they have an opportunity, for example, what changes do you anticipate? Mm-hmm. Is that a typed in paragraph? What is it?
At this point, we're thinking it's an open-ended one probably, but we'll work with getting the consultant to see what's the most appropriate form for each of these. But I would anticipate that it may be open-ended. We may give them some kind of direction as to these particular things, but we'll see what they think in terms of what their experience has been. What kind of response do you get to a question like that?
As I recall from the original Mind Mixer presentation, they essentially said when they start surveying the responses they were getting to a particular question or set of questions, they can then go back and say, somebody's not getting this, we can retailer it. Mm-hmm. And it's really a conversation. It's not a one-time survey.
Do they retailer it or come back to us?
They come back to us, and then together we'd retailer it.
Exactly.
I mean, the idea is it's an ongoing conversation, not just a one-time submittal of response to a survey question. It's you see something in this question that you think you're being asked, are you still beating your wife? Then come back and tell us, and we can reframe the question and maybe get more useful information back.
Right. Absolutely. That's a good point.
Well, let's. I do a lot of editing over the years, so Littleton doesn't embarrass itself. So let's go through my edits here.
Actually, if you'll just hand those in to us, if you just hand them in to us, that'd be great. Because we'll let Mind Mixer take those and work with them too.
Just a few. Okay. 6, 7, and 8. Do you think people in Littleton are generally happy? That's, come on. Do you think people in Littleton are generally happier than people who live in other places? That's kind of pompous on our part to
Objection, Your Honor. That requires what's the word, Kirsten? Speculation.
Right. You've got 3 questions here that refer to sneakily talk about somehow raising taxes to afford all this. If I'm a curmudgeon that's anti-tax living in Littleton, and I read this, I'm thinking, oh, this survey is just a ruse to raise my taxes. That is number 23, 72, and 73. 58. What percentage of time do you drive over the speed limit in Littleton? Please take that out. That's embarrassing. And then just repetitive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Dennis, I have a question on, so you said this is going to be served up 7 questions at a time, and then we'll decide what questions.
7 to start off with, and then we'll add 1 each week for a total of 10. We get to 10, then we'll drop 1 off a week. So we'll have 10 on, is the way we're anticipating right now, so we have 10 on at any given time. So we'll have those ongoing conversations in 10 different topics.
And so with that, then, over what's the expectation over what period of time it will take to, whether we're at 80 questions or 70 questions. So what is our goal of, getting enough input? So to have 1 question out there that only has 1 comment doesn't really do much, so there's a statistical validity to it all.
We're anticipating it staying on, so it basically stays on for 10 weeks. But I think we'll work with the consultant and say if there's something just not getting a response at all, we'll pull it and try and get something else that actually generates more conversation. If something is generating and continues to generate new and fresh information, we might leave it on beyond that period. So I think it's pretty flexible. We just have a guideline for ourselves at this point.
And then the assessment of it, so the analysis, et cetera, are there different weights associated with different questions or groupings of questions? So I'm kind of coming back to your point of saying if there's a lot of conversation about something, you get more points, et cetera. So does that particular question and the feedback on that particular question carry more weight than something else?
I would anticipate it would. There's not a particular system that's assigned to that necessarily. It's one of those things we kind of work with over time and kind of say, okay, this one really did generate, so we really need to pay attention to it. And you got this kind of, this many people, so it'll stand out that way. They're also looking at quality of discussion, so they're doing the qualitative as well as quantitative, again, based on kind of their.
And they'll share that with us at that April meeting? Okay.
Share that.
Because that's really what, I'm keen to understanding is how do we then use this data?
Good.
It's great to have it, but if it's not actionable, then.
Absolutely. You bet. Absolutely.
And Andrew,
What efforts are you taking to ensure that you get an appropriate demographic mix? Going to the high schools to get a youth vote, going to community centers or senior centers to get that. As it stands right now, this is people in Littleton who happen to use the internet that have some social interest. How are you going to broaden that base?
It's a great question, and we're looking at this as one tool, one of several tools that we have. We also will have public meetings. We will have a written survey that will go out in the Littleton Report. And we're Kelly Nardi and Chris Hargath, who are our public communication office, have put together a pretty amazing marketing program for this. And again, working with a consultant, but you're going to see Inspire Littleton lots of places. You're going to start seeing it around. It's on Channel 8. It's going to be at Hudson Gardens. It's going to be at lots of places. We've got a banner going up. We've got lots of kind of things for people to see. But because you're right, we have a certain demographic will not be comfortable using the internet. So we'll have the written survey. We'll have other opportunities for them. We'll have public meetings where they can come and participate. Try and do as much outreach as possible and trying to broaden it. We've not done as much interactive internet before, so we've really missed that demographic in the past. And that was the frustration I think we had with the downtown plan, was that when we looked at the demographic, it tended to be a much older group, so we didn't get the younger group. So we really need to balance that out. David?
Yeah, there were two problems with that. Number one, it was heavily skewed to the older group, especially the ones who lived in Littleton for 25, 30, 35 years. Virtually no youth input. The other problem we had was what little demographic information we got to help discriminate who was saying they had problems with parking downtown and who didn't came 6 months after the survey was complete. Most of the input we actually got that was effective in differentiating between age groups and demographics, where they live, that sort of thing, came from our outreach one-on-one to stakeholder groups. So this should give us a better opportunity. Am I overselling this, Glenn, to say it's more of a blog site than anything else?
Yeah, I think it is similar to that, but it's a way of kind of drilling down with some subjects too, and you have total flexibility to change up questions if you start seeing trends, and maybe an opportunity to dig a little deeper on some of the things you say. But it's a few steps above a blog site. Yep, hopefully.
So are you saying that when you sign up, you fill out demographic information?
You fill out some demographic information. You don't do specific address. You don't. So some of it's optional, some of it's not. But they feel like they can get enough information from that, and by the time you start answering your questions, they'll be able to give us a pretty good idea in terms of who's responding and what we're seeing from it.
You might get more younger people being on the internet.
I wonder if to go with, say, one of the high schools or a couple of the high schools and have seniors participate in this. This is theoretically a community many of them will stay in. That could be a great chance to get to them. The target outreach meetings sound fantastic, assuming they're attended. And so long as the efforts are put there to get everybody in attendance to it, because as I think of some of my neighbors, it's a crapshoot whether they would or would not attend, and obviously want their interest.
The other problem I see is education. there's a big difference between providing information that's intended to direct somebody's response and providing information that gives them enough background to understand the consequences of the response, especially when you start getting into the economic considerations and what are you willing to pay for, that sort of thing. So I think in a lot of these questions, especially toward the end, it's going to be very important to set the stage without trying to skew the results.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Dennis, can you share that marketing plan with us, maybe at one of the next meetings?
Absolutely.
And some things to consider with that, and even coming back to the point of, when the different outreach meetings are happening. So we may get a lot of participation in one particular outreach meeting, and then all of a sudden there's an influx of activity that particular week, but we only had those questions 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, versus another one might have a different set of questions, a month down the road. So just something to think through, or just make sure we're aware of how, again, what we're doing from a marketing impacts what activity happens on the website.
Absolutely. Just in terms of what those are, what we've done is we've kind of we're working together with City Council's meetings. City Council is changing their format. They've done the community outreach meetings where they came in here generally. They did it district by district, and each district got one meeting per year. What they're doing now is they're doing citywide meetings, and they are spreading them out geographically, but it's not district specific. And so the idea is that they will have more of a kind of show and tell, more of a carnival, more of a kind of here, come see us, something that is not just a serious conversation that we've had for the last few years, with the thought that, again, they may attract a different demographic than we've had. And so we're looking at those being scheduled from 4:30 to 6:30, and then we will follow immediately after that, 6:30 till 8:30, with our meeting at the same location. That doesn't happen every time. The first meeting, for example, is at Trailmark in the park, and there's not a facility there that works for us. It actually works fairly well time-wise for us because that's in the end of May. Our site just goes online 1st of May. And what we found, I think, Andrew, too, is that the consultant has found, rather, is that the longer the site is up, the more people come to the public meetings because, again, they have that sense of ownership and people you wouldn't have seen at public meetings before. There's still a certain group who will never get out to the meetings, but we hopefully will get enough representation that at least their position is at least represented by someone. The first one's at Trailmark. The second one, and that's on May 22nd. The second one is June 26th. That's going to be at Powell Middle School. And that's the first one that we actually show up at 6:30. We'll have a meeting, 6:30 to 8:30. And then the third one is July 24th at Euclid Middle School. And again, we will be there 6:30 to 8:30. That goes from 4:30 to 6:30. So we're going to just dovetail right on top of, right after those. And the fourth one is August 28th at Goddard. And then the final one is back here, September 25th, in the Littleton Center. And at this point, I don't think it's going to be council. I think it's just going to be our meeting. And we anticipate possibly coming back at that point with kind of an initial, here's what we've heard, kind of report back to people in terms of what we're thinking we've heard going through the other meetings. We're also anticipating that they're not going to be the same meeting each time. It's actually going to be a progression. So we'll see additional, different information at each one. So you could go to any district. You could go all 4 meetings, all 5 meetings, and you'll see different things and hear different conversations as you go through that. So that's the idea. This fits into a larger process, which starts off, we've actually been, working on the organization, which talks about getting the consultant on board and starting to think about the marketing and what we're doing here. Data gathering is beginning this month. And we launched the website on May 1st. May 22nd, we have our first outreach meeting. The second council outreach meeting is June, and then the written survey we're anticipating that being in July. So we'll have had 2 public meetings, and then we have a public survey going out in the Littleton Report. And the way that goes, it goes out to all the households, all the businesses, all the addresses in the city of Littleton. And that's how we distributed our survey last time, as well as having some out. And again, not everybody reads it, as we discovered, or at least they don't respond to those surveys, but hopefully they'll get a different group for us. And then we have a check-in scheduled for July, so we'll have 2 public meetings. We can check in with City Council, here's what we're hearing, here's where we're going. And then July 24th, we've got our 3rd outreach meeting. August 28th, our 4th outreach meeting at Goddard. So we'll have had 4 through the summer. It's a pretty intense summer of meetings. In September, we'll start looking at what have we heard and start putting that in writing in terms of we've gotten lots of input. What have we been hearing? We'll have a second check-in that same month, September, and then we'll have our final outreach meeting that we're anticipating scheduled was currently, which is September 25th, here at the Littleton Center. And again, we're anticipating reporting back and starting to say, here's what we'll be hearing. Are we correct? Or do you have other thoughts on that? And then we look at finalizing and posting the draft plan for review in December, and then coming back the first part of 2013 with the review for City Council and public hearings. So again, we've got that 3rd check-in with City Council and the public hearing.
Draft plan of what?
I'm sorry?
Draft plan of what? A comprehensive plan, or?
We are looking at kind of the 30,000-foot level. We're looking at goals and vision citywide. So,
only?
Yeah.
That's the draft plan.
Well, it would be, the draft plan would be the plan, it's the first take on the plan, and then we'd finalize that and look at adopting that. So it would no longer be draft.
Have the draft of the comprehensive plan in December.
Yeah.
Is your breath taken away yet?
Yeah.
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 The old adage was, whatever time, double it and double it again. You might be right on a comprehensive plan.
Well, that's possible. We think by staying at the 3,000-foot level and looking at goals and vision, key ones, kind of give us the direction. And something we found when we were doing the downtown plan was, we really felt a need to have that kind of update on what's the citywide vision for ourselves. How does downtown fit? And before we go to any more corridors, before we go to any more areas in the city, we feel like we need to have that sense of what is the overall. And we're trying to keep it fairly simple. So we don't want a 45-page vision statement. We want something short and simple. And
Dennis, what do you envision the Planning Commission's role in the public outreach meetings, the 6:30 to 8:30 follow-up? How are they going to be formatted? Are they going to be sort of boards and stations like we did it previously?
Well, we'll have boards and stations at the 4:30 to 6:30. So we would really appreciate participation in that, because we're anticipating getting a lot of one-on-one interaction at that point. So that's largely to encourage people to participate, as well as getting one-on-one communication and conversations going. So getting issues identified and getting some direction of those, and then encouraging people to go to the 6:30 meeting where we have more of a presentation and feedback on that. So we're not sure exactly, we don't have each of those programmed, but we kind of have a sense of where we're going. So,
And to follow up on that, are there thoughts on how Planning Commission then gets engaged in the regular updating of the draft to that December?
And we're anticipating that we would be doing the regular updates with Planning Commission, because we have that kind of on the agenda. You have the report back to Planning Commission in terms of where we are, as well as that participation. So, and again, the participation in that 4:30 to 6:30 as well as the 6:30 to 8:30 too. So we see you there as well. So.
Okay. So there's an expectation that we be at that 6:30 to, well, at the whole thing if possible.
If possible, but we certainly understand that, that's a long time. And so we don't anticipate anybody citizens going to the 4:30 to 6:30 and staying the full length of that meeting. It's more of an open house, kind of a drop-in. So we'd anticipate if they're going to come to our meeting, it may come, and they know they're coming to it, they may come right at the end of the 4:30 to 6:30. So.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
Well, one is, this is not meant as a criticism of Mind Mixer, but I have to ask, how much is it costing for Mind Mixer?
We have a not to exceed 9,000.
No, I'm sorry, 9,000?
9,000.
That's it?
That's it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Sure beats whatever Civitas meetings and going on
We
forever.
thought it was a really good price for what we're getting in terms of expertise that they provide. A lot of what they're doing is online, and so we communicate with them. We have a meeting once a week that's they're in Omaha, we're here. It takes a half an hour, so it's not an extensive amount of their time. And the meeting with you, we anticipate you'll probably be meeting with the guy out of Boulder as well, online as well. So he may not be here either. So, but that conversation is still quite good, and so and the interaction is great. So we're using their technology.
Bear in mind, as I do, either as a businessman or a skeptic or a skeptical businessman, this is essentially a loss leader. They're assuming that once they've introduced us to this process, we'll become so addicted to it and find so many other applications throughout the city's future development that we'll be eager to sign on for more. And it may be true.
We're also one of the first communities in the state that they're coming into. They're talking to Denver. They're talking to other places, but yeah.
Instead of every 30 years, we'll do a comprehensive plan every 3 years. Is that what you're saying?
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
I did have one more, rather either prickly criticism or a request. In the information about Inspire Littleton and on the blog site, it talks about the comp plan last being updated in 1981. Until 1981, we had no comp plan. 1981 was when the comp plan originated. It's been revised in 84, 88, 90, 99, 2000, 2005. So right now, the flat comment, it was last updated in 1981, taints the discussion just a little bit and suggests that we've done nothing with it for 30 years. That's not really true. I'd really like to see that adjusted.
And I think typically what we've said is it was written in 1981. It's been updated since, but we've not had a major.
Yeah, what it says is it was last updated in 1981.
Right. So.
And a lot of it has been a Band-Aid on a broken arm.
No argument there whatsoever.
Yeah, we missed that. We apologize. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So.
Do we have any staff reports? We need to wrap up here.
No, sir.
Okay.
May 9th, commission training, right
Okay.
in this room, I believe.
Yes. You should have received your board and commission handbook, and Commissioner Rudnicki has signed, which means he's read and fully approves of what he received. And
I did go to the 2 Brad Bailey introduction, 101 introduction.
okay, well, this will be different. This year we're going to have Tammy Tenoy from Sursa, so we hope to see you back. And please turn in your receipt for the handbook when you've had an opportunity to read and sign.
Our next regular scheduled meeting happens to fall on Memorial Day. I presume we're not going to meet that night?
April 23rd.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the May 28th meeting. Sorry, I'm trying to make plans for a trip to Europe for 6 weeks. And
It's not May.
you were saying May 9th, and I'm thinking, oh, the next one beyond that. Anyway, I assume that we will not be meeting on May 28th.
That's probably true.
Okay. We don't have the liaison from the HB board here, so are there any other commissioners' reports? Hearing none, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Good man.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. Welcome again to our new members.